given me this opportunity to talk on this topic. So I think we are going a little back to forth. So, but anyway, because of the time and other constraints, let me go into the topic specific. So coming to the Dr. Sangam, I think I have 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, no.
Okay. So I'll try to brief in 10 minutes, though it's a vast topic, what's happening in the field of bariatric endoscopy. The listeners and the audience, this is actually a kind of a new topic, even for the gastroenterologists or the hardcore endoscopists. But as you all know, the frequent behavior of the obese, I don't say a patient, a person, is they do multiple diets, then they go to the bariatric surgeon, they ask for surgery, 95% refuse surgery, then look for magic solutions. Then again, they regain weight after losing some, again, they go on. So it's a vicious circle. So if you see this very good, elegant paper in NEJ.
Yeah, your slides are not seen.
Oh, not seen? One second, 1 second. Now?
No, not yet.
1 second. So I'll just redo it again.
I think you need to share your screen again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now you can?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Now?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah. So this is a paper from NEJM in 2017, where there is a cohort of population where they have found success of achieving weight loss with intense lifestyle intervention and pharmacotherapy intervention. Surprisingly, only 10% of this population achieved this. So on this note, now we as bariatric endoscopists, like how the orthopedicians have the arthroscopy, cardiologists have the angioplasty. In obesity, we strongly believe that we are a bridge between the lifestyle modification pharmacotherapy and on the other hand, the bariatric surgery. So what I want to emphasize is, if you see this Nature review in 2022, if you see the obese population who have been on pharmacotherapy and who have undergone surgery, there's a lot of lull or vacuum in between these two. And that is where we as bariatric endoscopists strongly feel that endoscopic therapies are going to take a big leap in the next decade. So I always tell all the people, and then this is what probably you have to convince an obese person, the rule of 10. 10% weight loss is good enough. You don't have to lose 35, 40%, 20%. 10% weight loss is good enough, because if you lose 10% weight loss of your original weight, then you have a positive effect from head to toe in terms of hypertension, diabetes, insulin resistance, hyperlipidemia, certain cancers, as the previous speaker told, and even in osteoarthritis, obstructive sleep apnea, then increasing the self-esteem and also enhancing the sexual life. So if you come to bariatric endoscopy in 2023, it's a vast topic, but predominantly what the take home is, that's divided into 4 categories. One is the space occupying devices, or the balloons, what you call. Then you have endoscopic suture gastroplasties. Then you have something as duodenojejunal bypass liners for treating diabetes and obesity. And of course, bariatric endoscopy has got an established role in post-bariatric surgery complications, if any bariatric surgeon in the forum. So primarily, we have 2 things, the gastric endoscopic metabolic therapies and the small bowel. Gastric, as I told you, they have the balloons and sleeve gastroplasties, and small bowel, you have the duodenojejunal bypass liners. What happens is, when you do the gastric therapies, you have predominantly the weight loss, which indirectly gives the metabolic effects. When you go at the small bowel level, you have the metabolic effects independent of the weight loss. So primarily, if you see the balloons, you have the, I don't want the video of this, but it's an intragastric balloon, which you all must have seen sometime, where we deploy the balloon on a OPD-based procedure and then inflate the balloon with 400, 500 ml normal saline. And then you see the weight loss of around 10 to 12%. So you have the gastric, the air-filled balloons and the liquid-filled balloons, but predominantly what we use in India is the liquid-filled balloons. Primarily, you have 2 kinds, the Orbera, and the second is the adjustable SPADS balloon. So we use a lot of adjustable SPADS balloon in AAG. And by and large, the meta-analysis and the pool data has shown around 10 to 12% or 15% weight loss in majority of the studies. And you have the 6 months old balloons, and now we have the 12-month long life balloons also. So coming to the second part, a little advancement in balloons, why you want to put it endoscopically. So here there is an interest interesting balloon called the obalon, which you just have to ingest it, like swells up and then creates a space occupying thing in the stomach. And after that, you pull out the tag. And of course, you have to remove it endoscopically after 6 months. So now the science has advanced in such a way that you have this Elurian balloons called ellipse balloon, where you just have to ingest it like a capsule inside that will go in, swell up, and it will remain for 4 months. Then it will automatically disintegrate and pass off in the feces. So this is again a new revolution in the balloons. But again, this balloon has got around 5 to 6% weight loss, unlike the protein balloons, which have got around 12 to 15% total body weight loss. This is actually, as I told, the Sparks balloon, which is very useful. The advantage of this is you can upsize or downsize the balloon according to the requirement. And we at AAG are doing a study on this with the pre and post US guided liver biopsy to see for the improvement of NAFLD and NASH parameters with this particular balloon. So to summarize about balloon, it is innocuous and has got a sustained weight loss, which is lasting up to 2.5 years. And this is again the AGA technical review, which I don't want to go into. The second part of my talk is the endoluminal restrictive procedures, what we do. These are like the lap sleeve gastrectomy, what the surgeons do. So this is called an endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty. So you have multiple instruments, but what we use in India is Apollo overstitch, which is very commonly used. It's a daycare procedure where we start doing a transmural suturing of the stomach, starting from the incisura and coming up to below the GE junction. We make stomach accordion, like a tube type, where there will be a 60 to 70% compromise of volume of stomach. And at the end of 6 months, 3 to 6 months, there will be around 20 to 25% weight loss. So from our group, we have published this paper where we did this sleeve gastroplasty in patients with obesity, pre and post. And when we have compared the NAFLD or NASH parameters improvement in terms of fibrosis and other markers, where we found significant statistical improvement in these patients with obesity and diabetes, obesity and fatty liver, the statistical significance improvement in the non-invasive hepatosteatosis parameters. And to support the evidence, we have got a landmark trial of a multi-center randomized controlled trial published in Lancet 2022 with this device in class 1 and class 2 obesity, where if you see there is a crossover after 52 weeks in 2 arms. And the results have been very fascinating, especially for the physicians here in the audience. As you see here, the ESG arm and the lifestyle modification arm, improvement in diabetes, metabolic syndrome, hypertension, the HOMA-IR ratio, HbA1c, then the hepatosteatosis index, CRP, and waist strip ratio. All have got a fantastic statistical improvement compared to the sham arm. And of course, there was a crossover study where the sham group has been taken into ESG and has been shown sustained results. Now, the next question, what comes in your mind is, can you compare the lap sleeve gastrectomy with ESG? Yes. This is a paper published by Saudi group where they have compared the LSG with ESG, the endoscopic with the surgery, and they found the comorbidities and the adverse events are very, very less in ESG compared to LSG. But at the same time, I'm not saying it's a panacea for all the obese people, but at least with class 1 and class 2 obesity, that is BMI between 30 to 40, ESG is going to take a big leap, and it is going, I'm not saying it's replacing surgery, but it's going to be at par with surgery in the next 1 to 2 decades. And sustainability of weight loss, there are enough data on this, sort of a 2-year follow-up and 5-year follow-up from the New York and Spanish groups, where they have found with ESG a sustained weight loss of 15 to 17% after 5 years also. I am skipping this. These are all other devices which are being used. So just to summarize, between ESG and LSG, both are equally efficacious, but ESG has got less morbidity than compared to the lap sleeve gastrectomy, because we all know post LSG, there is significant increased evidence of incidence of GERD, unlike ESG, where it will be other way around, where the people with GERD and obesity, ESG will decrease the GERD symptoms also. The last part of my talk is about what you all look forward. And I think many of the people across the country ask what's happening in AG about this diabetes, obesity, and fatty liver. So we as gastroenterologists and endoscopists believe that the epicenter for metabolic control is duodenum now. I think Dr. Seshadri also will agree with this. what's happening around across the world is what's happening at the duodenum. So if you see the simple physiology, I'll just take a minute on this. So the glucose metabolism, we all know pancreas, we all used to say or believe pancreas is the main. But now the metabolic control happens exactly at the first part of the duodenum. As you see here, if you take a balanced diet, which we quite often don't do, the incretins and anti-incretins in the brush border of the duodenum will be balanced, and that leads to euglycemia. But if you take a sumptuous meal after all of these conferences of lunch and dinner, then there'll be an imbalance between these incretins and anti-incretins, which leads to insulin resistance, hyperglycemia, hyperlipidemia, NASH, NAFLD, and so on and so forth. So this is the basis of all the things. So with this as the back of the mind, people started working on the small bowel interventions. We all know about Roux-en-Y bypass surgery or the one anastomosis gastric bypass, what they are doing now. It has got a fantastic improvement in the diabetes, glycemic control, and also weight loss. But again, surgery is surgery. So to alternative for surgery, folks started working in USA about duodenojejunal bypass liner called endobarrier. So this had a major impact in losing weight and diabetes mainly predominantly. But unfortunately, this device had some side effects in the term of liver abscess and all. So it was withdrawn by FDA from the market. With this in the back of the mind, we at AAG started working with a group in Minneapolis and developed this device called EndoSleeve. It is kind of a pyloroduodenal jejunal bypass liner, and it's an OPD-based procedure where we just install this device in 15-20 minutes. And then this device will be at the pyloroduodenal junction like a biflange stent. And this will cover the first part of the duodenum up to 60 centimeters by a PTFE coated sheath. And this prevents the absorption of nutrients, thereby leading to more changes in GLP and GLP-1 analogs. Again, retrieval also pretty much easy. It takes hardly 5 minutes, and we can just retrieve this after 6 months. The initial first in human trials where we have shown there is improvement in the HbA1c by 1.8 to 2% with weight loss of around 12%. But again, it's not as rosy as it looks. What happened is in those 10 cases, what we have done, there was 30% migration of this device into the distal small bowel because of the robust movements at the pyloroduodenal level. So we went back to the bench side and started working on how to hold this device. Because of COVID, there was a little lull for 2 years. We are now coming up with the next phase of human trials where we want to fix this device at the pyloroduodenal area, and that will lead to improvement in the glycemic parameters. The main aim of, in fact, me and Dr. Reddy work closely with the US group, is this should be done by average endoscopist as an OPD-based procedure and be affordable for an average Indian. That's the main motto we started with, and I'm sure and confident that we will be giving this to the world in the next 1 year at least. A little 1 minute on the ablative therapy, which again you must have been reading about in the papers and in the scientific journals. Duodeноmucosal resurfacing procedure, where we elevate this duodenal mucosa with hot water saline and we burn the mucosa. So what happens is with this, there is some changes in the enterochromaffin cells. And as you see here, the lifting of duodenal mucosa, ablating, and after 3 months, the mucosa obviously will come down to normal. And there is science behind this. There is a randomized control trial published in the Gut in 2020 and 2022, where after this DMR, there is improvement in the glycemic index, improvement in the fatty liver parameters, improvement in the insulin resistance parameters, and also other metabolic parameters like anti-inflammatory cytokines and the lipids. Again, this is a little advanced, which I don't want to bore you with. This is again a pure endoscopic thing, which is again duodenojejunal bypass. It's not a liner, but it is more of a magnet, which will create a fistulous opening, like how the surgeons do the ileal diversion. So to summarize, the duodenojejunal bypass liners have got improvement in the glycemic control, weight loss indirectly, and of course, improvement in the metabolic parameters. Another fascinating thing, what we are doing nowadays is doing either a balloon or endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty. And especially people who are binge eaters, we are adding these GLP-1 analogs thanks to the oral semaglutide, which is in the market. So you will have around 15 to 20% weight loss with the endoscopic procedure, around 4 to 5% weight loss with this. So cumulatively, you'll be having around 20 to 25% weight loss. And especially in binge eaters, where you see the weight regain, these GLP-1 analogs have got a good significant role to cut down their appetite. So this is again in summary gastric EBMTs and small bowel EBMTs, as I told you. So endobariatrics is a stomach with small bowel. The future lies where probably a day comes where you do the endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty or balloon in stomach, and you put our jejunal bypass liner in the duodenum, which will give both exactly like ruined by bypass surgery. Again, this is not a single man show, not like Dr. Sangram will do himself or Dr. Rakesh will do. It's a team effort. You need a good bariatric endoscopist, surgeon, endocrinologist, physician, orthopedician, nutrition, more important, and also a clinical psychologist and physiotherapist. So with this in the background, we at AAG have under one roof a Center for Obesity and Metabolic Therapy, where we all work together and give the obese person a holistic, comprehensive approach and treatment. I'll conclude here, and I think I haven't overshot the time. Thank you for the patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Rakesh. Kindly stay connected because we'll finish the other talk. Our moderator, Dr. Nita Deshpande. Madam, can we go ahead with the Dr. Krishna's talk?
Yes,
so,
please. I see Dr. Krishna has come in.
Yeah.
So it would be nice if we can hear him.
Yeah.
Dr. Krishna Sheshadri. So Dr. Krishna is a friend of mine, and he is an excellent researcher, a scientist, an endocrinologist, wears many hats, and he has a wonderful holistic view of a lot of issues in endocrinology. And he's going to give us an overview of obesity in 2023. Dr. Krishna, over to you. Is Dr. Krishna here? I had seen him just now.
I think some connectivity issue.
Oh, he's not able to unmute.
Yeah.
Dr. Krishna, can you just, rejoin? Can you just leave the meeting and rejoin? Maybe you'll be able to manage.
I've unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, screen. What's showing on your screen?
First slide is showing obesity.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. First, let me apologize that I will have to leave at 7:55 or 57, simply because I goofed and agreed to another oration today, a medical education oration. But when Dr. Sangram Biradar calls and Neeta is there, I can't say no. So, and Dr. when I said I'll do a specific topic, Dr. Sangram wanted me to do a overview. So I've been interested in this from 1997. When I took my boards in 1997, there were hardly 5 to 10% of questions on obesity. Today, 30 years later, I'm sure I've taken 2 more boards, and the majority of questions are on obesity and diabetes. And so what I thought is I'll start off from that time and work through 8 things. I won't bore you too much, just a different sample, and then you can have a big discussion on this. The first thing is, my big interest was this particular chart. This showed the prevalence of obesity in 1991. And I remember till 2008, every year I was adding this US data to show what was happening. In 1991, if you notice that some of these cases, states in the southern part of the US had about 10 to 14% obesity. And you would notice that 10 years later, they had the same incidence of diabetes. Now, fast forward to 2021, and there are a few states that have 45 to 50% obesity, and the rest of it were 35 to 40% over. You will see that there's not a single blue in the whole country. So this is how my interest started. Worldwide, this is the same, and you're noticing that by 2015, you're seeing both in Asia and other countries, and we had a very beautiful comment by the chairman here about obesity in islands, right? This is the obesity forecast for 2040. You're looking at a 30% of obesity in men and overweight and about 25% approximately by 2040. So we all know that obesity increases the risk of complications. It's important to understand it's the most important forerunner of diabetes. And many of us have now started believing that the primary therapy of diabetes has to be through obesity, and that will be through one of the studies that I'll show you quickly as we go on. So the blues have become reds. The problem has remained higher, children especially. Let me talk a minute about where is genetic obesity. 10 years ago, this was very, very important. We hear very less about it, but I think it's important to understand it because a lot of coming therapies are going to be because of genetic therapies. Remember that obesity is a disease basically at the hypothalamus, where the body is not able to match the inputs and the outputs. And at some point of time, there is a mismatch between what you take in and what you store, right? And I've done many talks on this. Today is a sampler, I'm stopping there. But it's important to understand the difference between monogenic versus polygenic obesity. Monogenic obesity is early, severe, high genetic contribution, usually a single mutation. Large genetic effect, it's rare, it has high penetrance, there's really no environmental influence. The obesity that we have may have a modest genetic contribution. If present, there are 100 variants of nearly many genes. Each variant only has a small effect. It's very common. It has low penetrance, but environment is a key determinant. These are the monogenic obesities that we know of. And as late as 2018, we've had discovery of single genes. In the meantime, the GWAS has occurred that has showed almost about 1,200 genome associations to the GWAS. This, of course, is leptin deficiency, which we know was discovered, the first to be discovered. And of course, it's one of the few obesities where actually recombinant leptin treats obesity. The rest of us are leptin resistant, and therefore we are not. But some of these monogenic causes of obesity are important because the functional of these genes gives us new clues of how to take care of other obesity. And I just highlighted the ones that are involved in treatment of regular obesity. For example, the MC4R, the melanocortin 4 receptor, there are drugs that are used for this particular form of obesity that are now in trials for garden variety obesity. Similarly, the POMC or the pro-opiomelanocortin. For example, Prader-Willi syndrome, we use oxytocin now for many of the symptoms, and it's something that can be used in other conditions. The environment, however, is the most important part, and now people have talked about sitting as a new smoking. One of the things that we know is that our gut microflora determine obesity to a large extent. There is a relationship between the gut microflora and the brain, and this is called the gut-brain axis. And in fact, one of the very interesting treatments that people have talked about is fecal transplantation in the very obese. Doesn't work too well, but that's been used. But ultimately, it's a toxic environment. Moving away from who we are, eating foods that our ancestors did not eat, fast food, processed food especially. I think there is more and more and more data that processed food is the killer. And of course, sugar. Sugar greater than four servings per week, high incidence of obesity. And of course, we know the story of the sugar lobby. But remember that anytime you touch a can of Coke, that's 39.8 grams of sugar, about 27.5 in Red Bull. So be careful. And of course, if they tell you just for a few pennies more, you can get a little more of the drink, it actually increases the number of calories. So, and of course, young people are the most important. I'm not doing a pediatric talk, but remember that they actually have a lot of calories from saturated fat. Of course, the fitness bit, I won't go into it in depth today, but remember that we are people who take escalators to the gym. But the question is sitting the new smoking? And this is something that people are talking about over and over and over again, about sitting being the new smoking. The answer is sitting is probably not smoking. And this data shows that not really, but it's important not to be sedentary. I want to talk about something that people have talked about in the past, which is the metabolic healthy obesity. Is there anything that is metabolically healthy? So remember that we have decreased fitness, chronic positive energy balance, genetic size. Ultimately, there is adipocyte, there's ectopic fat. When the fat becomes inflamed, that's when the complications occurs. But there's a small amount of patients who do not have complications, in whom the fat is present, the adipose tissue has hyperplastic, there's normal angiogenesis, the fat is stored in subcutaneous rather than in visceral. There are protective signals like adiponectin that are present. This is metabolically healthy obesity. But interestingly, this can be a transition. The majority of us have metabolically unhealthy obesity, is adipocyte hypertrophy. The adipocyte undergoes insulin resistance. There is inflammation. And this slide, I have shown it for years and years from Suganami, that shows that there is a jugalbandi in the abdomen that causes both inflammation and lipokine production. The fat becomes ectopic, there's insulin resistance, then there is diabetes, NASH, and heart disease. But what is interesting is to see that this group that is metabolically healthy, that where fat acts as a sink, but here the metabolically unhealthy. But what is important to understand is that even in patients who are metabolically healthy, you will notice that the incidence of type 2 diabetes is not the same as someone who's lean. The incidence of cerebrovascular disease or heart failure is not the same as someone who is lean. So really that even the metabolically healthy people need to be targeted, even though they may not have the consequences immediately. But what is important to understand is metabolic health and unhealthy are transient. Here is the example of somebody who is metabolically unhealthy, who was treated, became metabolically healthy, the treatment was interrupted, then again became metabolically unhealthy, and finally had bariatric surgery and became healthy. So it's a transition that goes on back and forth, and the idea is to keep this patient, even if a little obese, in a metabolically healthy space. When it comes to that, here is the big news. And I'm going to just quote one study today that shows that caloric restriction causes weight loss and also reversal of diabetes. The direct study, and remember this was done in primary care, not in an endocrinologist's office or a bariatric surgeon's office, that showed that up to 86% of patients who had about 15 kilograms of remission of weight loss at remission. These are people who were in primary care practices. They were put onto 800 calorie diets. Their diet was replaced, then food was naturally replaced, and they actually showed remission of diabetes. And this is why there is a shift from anything else to obesity as the primary target in diabetes, and showing that at the end of year 2, the intervention group had a greater incidence of remission. Whether Neeta is there and she's an expert on this, I'm somebody who sticks my neck out and says that whether it is intermittent fasting, whether it's time restricted meals, these all help. Changing macronutrient content without reducing calories does not work. But here is data to show that calorie restriction actually works if it is done. You've had a great talk on bariatric surgery. I'm just going to tell you one thing. It works, and it works for a long period of time. This data is excessive weight loss, but you'll notice all these procedures at the end of 8 to 10 years still have considerable weight loss. So metabolic surgery is going to stay for some time. But medical therapies are catching up. That brings me to the last two parts of my talk. The first thing is the current medical therapies all bring down the glucose by about 5% to 7%, right? Even up to liraglutide, that's it. But here is the kicker. Currently, we are looking at drugs that bring down the weight by up to 10 to 15%. And in the pipeline, drugs that will bring down as much as bariatric surgery. The idea is to complement bariatric surgery. Some of us endocrinologists think it is to replace, but I think it's to complement bariatric surgery. The first strategy is to increase the dose of GLP-1 RA. This is the Award 11 study. Dulaglutide of 4.5 milligrams increases the weight loss by up to 4.5. When semaglutide's weight is increased, this is 2.4 milligrams per week. You would see there is a 16% weight loss in the sema group in the step 1 study. So this is great stuff, right? But look at the pipeline. The pipeline is actually looking at a lot more stuff. Interesting ones, the glutides, the twin cretins. Look at this thing called setmelanotide. This is what I talked about when I talked about MC4R agonism, right? Then FGF21, leptin analogs, and the cannabinoid receptors, which we gave up some time ago, are all coming back. This is an example of how combinations work. This is CargiSema, which is amylin 833 plus semaglutide, 17.1% weight loss. Amazing stuff. But what is going to be the molecules of the future are the coagonists. That is 2 drugs or 3 drugs into a single molecule. This is the GLP-1 glucagon coagonist, the GLP-1 GIP coagonist. This is a triagonist. They can be a chimera where they just added onto it, or they can be fusion where they just linked up to it, right? The example that is often quoted is tirzepatide, almost entering the market, has a body weight of about 11.3 kgs, and the percentage of patients who reach a greater than 15% weight loss at 15 milligrams of tirzepatide is almost 24%. That's bariatric surgery levels. But what is in the future? This is looking at the twin cretins. They are addressing the brain, the brown adipose tissue, the thermogenesis, the stomach. But what we really want is weight loss of 20 to 25%. And that's where these novel therapies are going to come in. Some, like tesofenacin, that's looking at the central nervous system, the cannabinoids. Remember, we had rimonabant that's coming back in a different name. Leptin analogs are coming, more and more dual and combined agonists, FG21 analogs. Interestingly, the skeletal muscle is bimagrumab. And I'm going to spend 1 minute on something that I love, and that is looking at brown fat. So brown fat is something that we all have, which is called baby fat. What we realized in the 90s and the 2000s was that when you took a bath in the Arctic Ocean, or you were stuck in a refrigerator, you're exposed to cold, the brown fat renews. Today we know that brown fat increases burning of fat and reduces obesity, right? But we have white fat. How can we express brown fat? And it seems to be that there are many ways to do this. One is cold. The other is taking capsaicin, chili, the kind of things that we eat at home. The third, of course, is some drugs that I will talk about. So you could use curcumin and capsaicin. You could use resveratrol. You could use ginger and add these things to your diet, and that actually increases thermogenic heat and weight loss. But what is interesting is this new drug called mirabegron. This is a B3 receptor agonist and beta 3 receptor agonist. And what it does is it increases the expression of this particular protein called UCP1. UCP1 works at the level of the mitochondria, increases ATP production, and therefore dissipates heat. So the white fat can be browned by this particular drug. Similarly, thyroid receptor agonists can do the same thing. So it's an exciting time for us to be in obesity. The problems remain, they increase, but there is also a lot of data to show that we are at the best time ever